I resolve to save my people, the remnant of Israel, for I love them as a parent. I will console my people and lead them back home. I will comfort them and give them gladness for sorrow. Our Old Testament lesson reads a bit like God's New Year's resolutions, as reported by Jeremiah. This poetic inventory of divine promises asserts God's intent to bring the faithful home, both literally and figuratively. God has the power to redeem the most prodigal of nations, even the most prodigal among us. When we hear scripture read in church, most of us make the assumption that the snippet dished up is characteristic of the text from which it is taken. Contraire, not so with these tasty morsels from Jeremiah. These tender words are uncommon to Jeremiah's prophetic record. Jeremiah spoke for God during a very dramatic and intense time in Israel's history. Jeremiah himself was such an extraordinary and fervent character, and his words so threatening and frightening that he was vilified in his own time as a traitor and a heretic. Only much, much later, with several generations worth of hindsight, could the people see that Jeremiah's hard words had both been prophetic and true. Indeed, they had been God's words of love. Jeremiah began preaching and prophesying in what the Bible reports as the 13th year of King Josiah's reign, approximately 627 BCE. He continued for 40 years until the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon in 587. During Josiah's reign, the mighty Assyrian Empire fell, thus freeing Judea from the ever-present threat. The national mood took a turn, perhaps understandably, toward a strong religious nationalism. Most of that era's prophets saw this as a good thing, as a return to the faith and practice required by the law. Jeremiah, however, was the lone, loud, and annoying voice to the contrary. In his view, the new religious nationalism was not holy and righteous, but self-righteous. The people's religious and national aspirations were more about who they thought they should be and not about who they really were. According to Jeremiah, this was not faith, but rather a self-satisfied arrogance that would eventually lead to worse trouble than before. So here in the midst of Jeremiah's dire ranting and angry judgments, we find a short 3-chapter poetic and prophetic oasis known as the Book of Consolations. Here, Jeremiah offers God's people a promise of love, redemption, and renewal. He sees what is going to happen, defeat and exile. But Jeremiah also sees God's resolve to never, ever abandon God's people. Every year, over 50% of Americans make New Year's resolutions. Our resolutions tend to fall into 4 general categories: self-improvement, health and fitness, relationships, and financial. The vast majority of us will fail. 88% of those who make New Year's resolutions fail to keep them. More often than not, we set ourselves up for failure. We make outrageous and immeasurable goals like learn to speak Chinese fluently, get into an Ivy League school, and get straight A's, quit my bottle per night wine habit, get in shape and run an Ironman triathlon. Fall in love. And my personal favorite, get my life together. What does that mean? I don't know. But if we peel back the layers on those resolutions, we are looking for just what Jeremiah says God has to offer: love, redemption, and renewal. Sadly, the average New Year's resolution is no way to get at any of that. Brene Brown is a PhD and licensed master social worker who studies human connection and relationship. Specifically, she studies shame. Brown defines shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and somehow unworthy of love and belonging. She says shame is universal. No one is immune. She also says that all women, men, and children have an irreducible need for a deep sense of love and belonging. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love and be loved and to belong. I am preparing to take a week-long certification course with Dr. Brown in February, so I have been spending a lot of time considering her study and her work. You might say she is sort of on my brain. Brown's research does not specifically touch on resolutions. She does talk about goal setting. Dr. Brown would tell us we set ourselves up for failure with New Year's resolutions because the goals are about who we think we should be and not about who we really are. The goals are about things that make us feel shame, not about things that make us feel love, joy, and belonging. Much of Brown's research focuses on helping people to develop what she calls resilience. Life's disappointments and disasters, even the stress of everyday living, can leave us feeling unloved and disconnected. In her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, Brown offers guideposts toward developing resilience. Well, Brown doesn't go as far as to say we should go to church and participate in a faith community. She does say spirituality is a necessary component of resilience. And I love the way she defines spirituality. She says, spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. Practicing spirituality brings a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. In other words, we are all looking for what God has to offer. You know, it's not too late. It's only January 4th. We can still get a do-over on our resolutions. If we had as much love and compassion for ourselves as God has for us, perhaps our resolutions might sound a bit different. For Christians, the birth of Jesus is seen as the resolution, the fulfillment of God's promises spoken by Jeremiah. No one is unworthy. Everyone belongs. Even the blind, the lame, those with children and in labor, those who could not reasonably be expected to make a hard journey, those whom humanity might be tempted to abandon. God leaves no one behind. We are loved.